We're going to go ahead and call this Tuesday, February 21st, 2023, meeting of the Whitefish City Council to order. We're meeting both in person as well as remotely via WebEx or via Teams now, so welcome to those that aren't here in attendance. I would like to begin by reorganizing the agenda slightly to accommodate the North Valley Music School. I'm going to go ahead and move item 9C, which is a consideration of a request from the school to approve the building plans for the new facility, to immediately following our Pledge of Allegiance. And Christine, if you have comments, you can provide those comments at that time. So prior to communications from the public. So prior to. So with that said, I will ask Deidre, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance? United States of America, the republic for which it stands. Thank you, Deidre. Christine, welcome. Now would be your opportunity to comment on item 9C. Jake, we're getting a lot of feedback. Yeah, what's going on here? Sorry about that. Might be because of on my computer. Christine, welcome.
Okay. You guys can hear me okay, or should I back this thing up?
We can. Just name and address for the record,
Okay.
please, and your affiliation, if you don't mind.
Yes, my name is Christine Rossi, and I'm affiliated with North Valley Music School. So good evening, Mayor Mulfeld, City Councilors, guests. Thank you for your time and attention. I will try to make this relatively brief. Again, my name is Christine Rossi, and I'm here on behalf of North Valley Music School, along with our Executive Director, Deidre Corson, and the esteemed Terry Nelson, who has worn many hats at the music school, including past president, and he is currently one of our rock star fundraisers on our capital campaign committee. I serve as the North Valley Music School Board Chair. I also lead our new building committee, and I also serve on the fundraising capital campaign committee. Just as a quick reminder, last spring, Whitefish City Council approved the sublease agreement between Project Whitefish Kids and NVMS to lease the 2-acre parcel of land that is shown on this slide in front of us in the first one. So in accordance with our lease, we are requesting council approval on our building design. The lease also requires that we have approval from Project Whitefish Kids and the Architectural Review Committee. Letters of approval from both groups are already included in your packet. So a quick overview, North Valley Music School is the only nonprofit music school in the state of Montana. This year we are celebrating our 25th year of providing quality, affordable music education for students of all ages and all abilities. While we love our cozy little 100-year-old home on Spokane Avenue, and we love it, we are bursting at the seams and are at maximum capacity. A new facility, as you know, is desperately needed and warranted, and we just want to be able to continue serving the communities that we love for decades to come. So our new building will have ample and safe parking with an accessible drop-off area for students and faculty, and a meaningful expanded program capacity. The location that we're at provides easy access from neighboring communities and will have no impact to Whitefish traffic. It also allows for coordination of music lessons and sports activities at Smith Fields, which I am sure that many local parents will appreciate. Would you flip to the next slide? This is just another kind of a drawing of where we are located. It's a little bit more zoomed in, but River Lakes Parkway runs along the north, and then that little side street to the east is next to the baseball diamond. You can tell I don't have sports children. Next slide, please. So this building that you see in front of you is also on this poster, and it was designed by our team at LSW Architects. What you see in this slide and the poster is the north-facing view from River Lakes Parkway. There's a few things I'd like to point out on here. The building really has it's laid out in two separate areas. There's more of a public side, which is the one that you see on the east, and then there's more of a private side, we'll call it the studio side, and that is connected by an open waiting area and reception. There is a north courtyard that's kind of in between, and there's a couple of other renderings where we'll be able to see that a little bit better. But that north courtyard could be used for summer camps, group classes, small receptions. The multi-purpose performance space that you see on the east side with the window seats 100 people, and it's really been designed with flexibility in mind. That we can use for student recitals, we can use that for community events, jam sessions, and also for group classes. So you will hear us talk a lot about flexible spaces with this building, and we really wanted to keep that in mind when we went through this design. We flip to the next slide. So the next 4 slides are a slightly simpler elevation drawings that you can see what the building looks like from all different angles. So this is another view from the north, but what you can see in this elevation is the entry on the east side with the little canopy. Next slide, please. On the east side of the building, this features a really gorgeous rock facade from rocks from McGregor Lake, and it's the main entrance. We have 39 parking spaces, a really safe drop-off area, covered entry, and bike racks that are all on this east side. Next slide. The south-facing view is the one that's adjacent to Smith Fields, and it includes an 8-foot walking path that goes along the length of the building. We will work with Project Whitefish Kids to complete that on the entire parcel of land, and we'll take care of, obviously our part of it. This drawing, I think, really does a great job of showing that more public space to the east side and then the studio space off to the west. What you see from this angle is the backside where the reception and offices are going to go on the eastern side. The other thing that I love about this image is that the architects really tried to kind of incorporate nature and music and movement into the design. And so here, if you see a really simple drawing of this, you'll see that the roof line mimics kind of our beautiful mountain ranges, which we all really love that. Next slide, please. So finally, this is the west side elevation and the view where our studios are situated, and we've included a covered patio and then a grassy area that could be used for smaller outdoor performances. Next slide, please. The materials and the colors are really consistent with the surrounding areas and structures. They will be durable and easy to maintain. We do not want to spend a lot of time restaining anything. So the outer material is this fiber cement panel with kind of a varied batten pattern to give it movement and a little bit of interest. There's a standing seam roof that's a kind of a darker black mat with the warm cedar soffit underneath. The landscaping, I included in your packet some examples of some of the plants, but the landscaping consists of mostly native plants and trees. There's some no-mow cover and then some grassy areas that are going to be included, along with gravel along the outside of the building and in concrete in the patio spaces. So that you can flip to the next slide. Thank you. The interior of the building, this is what the floor plan looks like from, just kind of a bigger view of it, I think. Actually, the next one is a little bit, I think maybe the next one is, yes, that one's one, thank you. So here's an expanded floor plan. This building is 8,100 square feet. It includes that 100-seat flexible performance space that I mentioned, 14 private studios on the west side, practice rooms, a large group classroom that's over on the east side, more on the south. There's an instrument repair room, conference room, teacher break room, office and reception areas, and plenty of storage. One thing that we have done and really taken into account with this building is the acoustical treatment and consideration, which is going to be a really big improvement over our existing space where you can hear if somebody drops a book and it's loud. So we have a combination of diffusive and absorptive panels in the studio spaces and in our performance space that will really help with that sound absorption and diffusion. So we're excited. We're humbled by the momentum of this project and the wide community support. So far, we are at about 60% of funds needed to complete this project. And it's all from private donations and pledges. We are actively pursuing a grant from the Murdoch Foundation as well, and we will submit that in the next probably a few weeks. So thank you. Thanks for considering our request, and I'm available for questions.
Thanks, Christine. Any questions for Christine? We do need a motion to approve the building plans, considering the city will be acquiring the public property at some point in the future. Is there a motion?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I move to approve the consideration of a request from North Valley Music School to approve the building plans for the new facility in accordance with Project Whitefish Kids lease of Smith Fields.
Is there a second to the motion?
Second.
Seconded by Councilor Sweeney. Further discussion? All those in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. Those opposed, like sign, and that motion carries unanimously. Thanks, Christine. Thanks, Deidre. Thanks, Terry. Good luck with the project. You bet. You bet. Anytime.
You still have to stay, though.
You are done. Thank you. We'll move on to item 3, communications from the public. We do have one public hearing advertised for this evening. Otherwise, if you have anything to bring to the attention of the council, now would be your opportunity. Mr. Payne.
Good evening, Eric Payne, address 100 Central Avenue, Whitefish. I wasn't really planning on speaking this evening, but I thought I'd just say hi. We are here representing the Junction project that you are looking to approve and the multiple properties put together for annexation. Just want to say thank you, I guess, first of all. I think it was a little over 18 months ago since our initial preliminary request for annexation of that property, which obviously got the ball rolling on a bigger scale. But we're just really excited that this is finally coming to fruition. Obviously, we've all been through a lot of meetings together, mostly by Zoom, I think, during the COVID period. But it just feels good. This first time we've been through an annexation request like this before as a business, and it's been enjoyable. I've enjoyed working with all of you and all the comments and work back and forth, and we're just happy to bring this to closing. But I am here, as you guys address it. If there is any questions at that time, I'd be happy to answer them, best we can.
Thanks, Eric.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Further public comment this evening from those in attendance? Michelle, how about online?
For those of you who are online, if you'd like to speak towards the council regarding anything that is not considered a public hearing, please unmute your mic. I think we're good, John.
Thanks, Michelle. We'll go ahead and close the public comment period. Any volunteer board reports from the audience? Not seeing any. Michelle, any online? How about council? Any volunteer board reports? Rebecca?
Yep, I went to the tree committee, which has always been my favorite committee. And Arbor Day is going to be in Depot Park this year to help plant some trees to absorb moisture on the west side and shade on the south side. And then I brought up a discussion I'd had with our bear conflict management representative from the Fish, Wildlife, and Parks about getting rid of fruit-bearing trees in Whitefish on public property. It's quite controversial still. And there's two reasons for it. One is that it attracts bears, and we're trying to get bears to leave town. But the other thing is the chronic wasting disease goes into the ground, and then for years other deer can become contaminated and within a few years die of it. And so we have a gleaning program that Justine, the bear management specialist, started that our city has been actively engaged in. She thinks that even with the gleaning program, it still is an attractant that we probably should move towards eliminating on public property over time. So I'm just telling people about this now because I'm planting seeds because nobody wants to do it. But we do need to be realistic about not having bear conflicts in town, and we also don't want to have deer dying of chronic wasting disease. And so we might need to make drastic measures in the future. And that's all. Thank you.
Thanks, Rebecca. Further volunteer board reports? Not seeing any, move on to item 5. You have the consent agenda enclosed with the packet and the meeting minutes from both the regular and special sessions from February 6th.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to remove item D from
That gets no discussion. My preference would be, considering Mr. Payne is present here this evening, that we move that agenda item immediately following the consent agenda before our one public hearing. Sure. Anything?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I move to approve the consent agenda. I move to approve the consent agenda,
As amended?
and with further discussion, though.
Is there a second to the motion?
I'll second.
Seconded. Further discussion?
Yes,
And
Mr.
again,
Mayor.
this reflects that the consent agenda motion is to approve with the exception of item 5D, which we will hear prior to the next public hearing.
And I am asking to extract from the consent agenda item 5.c for further discussion. I hate doing this, but I have to.
And that again gets no discussion. We'll go ahead and move that ahead of item 5D, ahead of our one public hearing for the evening. Further discussion? All those in favor, please raise your hand. Those opposed, like sign. Now, in order, Giuseppe, to consider or reconsider ordinance 21-01, we will need a motion by a member of the council who voted in the affirmative, which was for the passage of the ordinance, which I believe was unanimous, and that will require a second before any debate.
So I move to discuss item 5C.
Is there a second to the motion? Seconded by Councilor Norton. Further discussion? All those in favor, please raise your hand. Those opposed, like sign. Andy? Yay or for or against? Okay, and that motion does carry unanimously. We can now reconsider item 5C. Giuseppe, I'll turn it back to you.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. As you are very aware, I've been a strong champion for approving the zone overlay. And last city council meeting, February 6th, it was presented in the latest version. And as we were moving for discussion, Councilman Davis suggested an amendment that added a restriction in item, you can see it in your packet at page 34. It's under 11-2Y-3, down below where it says residential. Now, considering the fact that these are already conditional uses, and I am guilty of not having realized when I supported that amendment that limits the residential to 2-family duplex through 6-plex dwellings. I did not realize that this is not a density ratio, but it's an absolute number, meaning the lot could be at 2 acres, 5 acres, 10 acres, or 20 acres. And in all fairness, and there was some public comment as well that refreshed my memory to the fact that I think this is too restrictive for what the purpose is. For that reason, I have to ask to discuss, as far as I'm concerned, that particular item.
Thanks, Giuseppe. Rebecca.
Yeah, I spoke to our planning director and Ben and Frank about this and Giuseppe about this. I felt like it came at the very last minute and without us actually understanding the repercussions of such a restriction on housing. And my vision out there was to allow housing, maybe in a mixed-use format. And so I wanted to ask our planning director if he would address how, if we kept that language in there to limit it to 6-plex, how would it affect the growth of housing in that area? It's a narrow corridor, so we already know it's commercial, but we were maybe hoping to have some types of mixed use to allow housing along there as well, but would you mind addressing that, Dave?
Yeah, sure. So some of those lots are narrower than others that are zoned at County B4 that might, if they were to annex, they would have this business transitional zoning. And the back parts of those lots might be appropriate for some types of residential. Could it be multifamily, it could be single family. As it's drafted and as you guys approved it at the last meeting, yeah, you could only do up to a 6-plex per lot with a conditional use permit. If someone were to apply for a planned unit development, they could ask for more density in exchange for, some community benefit, whether that be permanently affordable housing or some other types of things that would benefit the whole city as a whole.
Thank you. And then the other thing I wanted to mention is I know Ben and Steve were thinking it was too far to walk into town, but I think it's equal to other subdivisions out there. Emerald Heights is right behind those areas, and Montera's out there, and the lakes are out there. So I think it's within reason that people would live in those areas. I don't think it's too far out that people wouldn't be able to commute into the city by bike or walking or even going to grocery stores to encourage growth out there. So,
Steve?
Dave, just to clarify, obviously housing is a conditional use out there, but under a conditional use permit, there's no requirement to provide a community benefit, correct?
No, there is not.
Thank you.
But there are incentives for, if someone's going to do affordable housing, then they could have potentially more density, potentially less parking, building height, things like that. But yeah.
But no requirement?
No requirement.
Okay, thank you.
Andy?
I think it's precisely what our planning director just told us is why I supported Ben's motion the other night, is density can be achieved out there greater than a 6-plex through a planned unit development. And I think given the challenges, particularly with highway access out there, and I think also given the challenges with the distance to our central core of the community, I think that we would need to get something in return to make that happen. And I think through a planned unit development process, we can make it happen. And I think if we looked at a lot of the arguments that Mary Flowers made to us, was that we should have pushed more things towards the planned unit development. We're not precluding density out there greater than a 6-plex, but we are saying that you do have to go through a little bit more involved process, and you're going to have to provide some community benefits to make that happen. And that's why I supported Ben's motion. So.
Steve?
Can I make a motion?
Of course.
I move to pass Resolution 23- Ordinance 23-01 unamended.
Is there a second to the motion?
Second.
Seconded by Councilor Sweeney. Further discussion? All those in favor, please raise your hand. Those opposed, like sign, and the motion does carry on a 4-2 vote with Councilors Norton and Caltabiano voting in opposition. We will move to item 5D, which again was Resolution 23, extending the corporate limits of the city of Whitefish, Montana to annex within the boundaries of the city approximately 11.18 acres of land known as 111 Iverson Lane, 119 Iverson Lane, 140 Iverson Lane, and 6010 US Highway 93 South in Section 12, Township 30, Range 22 West in Whitefish, Montana, for which the owners have petitioned for and consented to annexation. As a reminder, the applicant is here and present this evening, and we will, upon removing that from the consent agenda, it's open for discussion now. If we want a motion to reconsider, we do need a motion on the table.
Mr. Mayor, I would like to make a motion to table this resolution.
You need to make first a motion to reconsider.
I would like to move, excuse me.
Sorry, again. Oh, go ahead, Angie.
I will make a
Yeah,
motion.
One second. I may be.
you don't have to make a motion to reconsider because you guys haven't acted on it
Oh,
yet.
thank you. I apologize.
Yeah, you're welcome. Oh, no worries.
Frank?
Would you like me to make a motion consistent with my motion to discuss or to?
Yes.
I would move to table this agenda item to our April 3rd meeting. And if I get a second, I'll be happy to explain my rationale.
That would be a postponement to a date certain?
Yes,
And that would be the April 3rd meeting.
that's what I proposed.
Is there a second to the
I'll
motion?
second.
Seconded by Councilor Fury. Andy, would you like to speak to your motion?
Yes. The reason I want to table this particular item is that I want to ensure that we have an option for zoning this property under the WBT zoning, which we've just now enacted and will become effective in 30 days. Short of that, this property would be coming in without our ability to use that zoning on that particular property. Hence the reason I would like to postpone it to that date at a minimum.
Further discussion? Steve?
Just a clarification, is it actually in would that actually, these properties be in the WBT?
So when it was in our planning jurisdiction previously, it was WB2. When it went to the county, it went to a county B4. The Highway 93 South Plan calls for the business transitional zone to be properties south of Highway 40. However, the map shows the future land use as business transitional, while the text says that it would be secondary business. So there's a little bit of a conflict in our 93 plan on what the zoning should be there. But the text of it says zoning south of Highway 40 would be WBT. The rezone for this property is going to the planning board in March, and will be coming to the city council in April, which is staff initiated.
Not if it's postponed.
Well, the rezone is not tied to the annexation. I mean, you could choose to, we could hold off on that. We could postpone the zone change. So yeah, if you don't annex it under our old process, we're not bringing it forward. You could vote to bring it forward at the same meeting as the zone change, and then you could consider the two things at the same time, which would be at that April 3rd meeting, which is what you guys postponed it to.
But it would already be at the planning board prior to the April 3rd council meeting, correct?
Correct.
Steve?
Angie, maybe you could weigh in on this, please, about this property is clearly north of Highway 40, but it's on the map. Which one takes precedence? The language or the map?
The language takes precedence over the map, Steve, but also I would say if you're going to postpone the annexation, I mean, you can't bring forth the zoning if it's not within city limits. So that would have to be postponed as well. So, I mean, if it's scheduled for the April or the March planning board meeting, if you guys were to postpone the annexation, which is your providence, you can't bring forth the zoning without having some sort of annexation. So, I mean, that just made 2 cents.
Thanks.
Giuseppe?
Yes, I have 2 questions. Number one, what's the date for the application to annex by the property owner? When did they apply?
I believe, yeah, sorry.
I think it was the 13th of February.
And Councilman Sweeney, just for me to understand, what is your concern, one way or another?
I think my concern is that we would want to have the opportunity to zone this property consistent with our WBT, which we don't have even in our zone or in our repertoire right now. The zone change will come to us when it comes to us after that property has been annexed. The other is that the reason I want to delay this is because I think that, quite honestly, I'm not sure that I'm necessarily comfortable with annexing property without having the zone change in front of us at the same time. That would be consistent with what we have, Giuseppe, with respect to our new process that's coming to us now, where a property that might be wanting to annex would come to us with a zone recommendation. And so
From the planning board.
From the planning board. And so we're a little off kilter. We can't get there yet. And I am not comfortable incorporating this property in our, in the property, under the current circumstances, and that's the reason I'd like to delay.
I fully understand. One more question.
Sure.
If the language precludes the city to overlay WBT, would the reasons for your motion be still valid?
For me, yes.
Question, Dana.
And I'm not accepting that as possible, because we do not currently have an ability to zone anything WBT, because we don't have that zone in effect. On a future date, we will have that zone, and that could be something we could consider for this property, notwithstanding that the zone is not currently designed for that property, for that particular property. It abuts it, it's right on it, and so that's why I think it's an important thing for us to consider.
I wonder, is it okay to ask the applicant some questions?
Before we go to the applicant, Dana, you have something to add?
I think it's just important to know that if we're looking at bringing the zone change and the annexation together at the same time, that's going to take time for that ordinance to go through planning board and council. And so you're looking at May, not April, before we would have that process available. So probably the second meeting in May.
So what you're suggesting is I should delay this, my motion should be amended to delay it until the second meeting in May?
To ensure that ordinance
To
is
ensure
through, I
that
believe.
ordinance.
Which is
Yeah,
the
I mean, if you're
20th.
looking at trying to approve the zone change and the annexation simultaneously, yeah, every other annexation request, the city has said, yeah, we want that in the city, and then waited to decide on the zoning when the zoning came through the process. But you made the decision, okay, we want to annex this, we want control over this property, we want it to be in city limits, we'll deal with the zoning when it goes through the planning board and gets to us. So, you guys would still have that option, if you were to approve the annexation tonight, to decide on the zoning when the zone change comes forward and comes before you guys in April. But to do them simultaneously, that process, because we have to change the zoning code under the zone change section to be able to consider those things together, at the same time, that process, it's going to the planning board in March, and then it'll come to you in April. That won't go into effect for another 30 days after the second meeting in April, where we'll have that opportunity for future zone changes to come forward together as we discussed when we went through the annexation policy.
And that's one of the main changes to the annexation policy, correct?
Yep.
Is that they'll come simultaneously? Okay. Steve?
Just to be clear, Dave, so the property owner is kind of in limbo, and Angie, you can weigh in on this too. The property owner is kind of in limbo until they get the zone change after they annex. Is that correct?
Yeah, that with the annexation gets passed, there's a question about what zoning is in effect on that property, which makes it difficult for us as staff to, deal with anything that occurs on that property because it's still technically zoned county B4.
Yeah, and I would say, Steve, too, we're working on is part of just the changes with our code with respect to bringing annexation in with zoning is doing basically kind of an interim zoning ordinance like we're considering tonight on property that's annexed if it doesn't coincide with the zoning. So we have city zoning, we have some direction while the actual zoning goes through. And that would be true if the zoning that they're requesting is not consistent with the county or doesn't meet the other statutory guidelines. But yeah, Dave's right, we're kind of in limbo if anything occurs on that property because it still will be county zoned.
Dana?
To clarify, we're off 2 days if we do the second meeting in May, so it'd have to be the first meeting in June to have the 30-day period for that process.
Which would be June 5th.
Yep.
Giuseppe, before I acknowledge you for questions of the applicant, quick, okay? And then we'll go to Ben, who has a question.
I have a question to the staff. What is the process for which this particular petition is in the consent agenda versus a normal matter to council? Because if you put it in the consent agenda, is it an implied recommendation to approve?
Yeah.
It's not, sorry, Dave.
Well, I was going to say, that's the process that we've always used for annexation requests. When someone annexes or requests to annex in the city petitions, they fill out the forms, the waivers, the utility stuff, and then it's always gone on the consent agenda, and the council has always approved it without discussion. So, but Angie.
Yeah, sorry, Dave, I didn't mean to step on you there. There is no requirement for a public hearing on annexations by petition. If over 50% of the property owners have signed the petition, we've generally taken them into city limits. That's a different process with contiguous land where it is required to go to public hearing, and wholly surrounded as well, although they do not have the right to protest. So generally, we have put annexations by petition on the consent agenda. They have been pulled off. As council, you do by statutory law have the right to grant or deny a petition for annexation on its merits. So, which is not really defined in state laws. I think I've told you guys before, the annexation statutes are fairly old, and I wish the legislature would focus on them.
Ben?
I'm pretty sure this is what you said, but just to make sure, the annexation policy that the council directed staff to produce, which allows the annexation and the zoning to get passed together, is coming back to this council in April?
It'll be on the April 17th council agenda, I believe.
Okay. And doesn't it seem a little, if there is questions about what zoning may be for this parcel, I mean, they can't, if the applicant annexes now, they won't be able to unannex, right? If they're unhappy with the outcome?
True.
So it seems.
Well, there is a process for de-annexation, but it's pretty hard to meet. And I mean, I guess I've only been here for 7 years, but I can think of one piece of property that we did de-annex, so.
So it seems somewhat unfair to the applicant. I mean, that's why we made the new process, right? To pass them together, because it's an irreversible step that can't go backwards on.
Did you have any further questions for, okay. Let's go ahead and act on the motion. I would like to see if Frank, if you would agree to modifying your motion to include the June 5th meeting.
I would.
And is that okay with the second, Andy? Okay. So the motion is to postpone until the Monday, June 5th meeting for this consideration. Is there further discussion? Steve?
Will this appear on the consent agenda or as a public hearing?
It would have to be a public hearing if we're doing the zoning along with annexation.
Yeah.
Thanks, Steve. Further discussion? Andy?
I guess question then is, if I understand Angie correctly, then we would not see a public hearing at the planning board in the March meeting for the zone change, which was a zone change to WB2, correct?
Yeah, we would not have, we'd have to pull that off because the property's not annexed, so we can't, you guys can't act on the zoning if it's not in the city, so.
Giuseppe?
I actually have a question for the applicant, whenever you deem the right time.
Anything further from the council? That's fine.
Yes, Mr. Payne. When you applied given to the rules of engagements and the terms of engagements that you had at the time, with your knowledge of the application. And you understand that being put in the consent agenda, silently approved, you would have been annexed accordingly to the current process in place.
That's correct. We applied 18 months ago under a precedent that had been set.
18 months ago.
Correct. We gave our initial request that we would, that's what started the ball rolling with the annexation in that corridor, was we've requested these properties, and that is what began this process. Obviously, I mean, it's discouraging to hear that this particular piece of property is being analyzed in a completely different process now. I came tonight thinking we had a formality, and I wasn't even prepared to speak. So it is somewhat shocking that we're under a different precedent.
Thank you very much. I have a question for the staff. Thank you. Yep. Whoever mentioned the date of February 13th, what's that date?
It was actually February 14th when they signed the agreement for annexation regarding water and sewer.
Further discussion? Steve?
Mr. Payne, could you come up for a sec? Is your intent to rezone this as WB2 in the city?
Yes, sir, our application does state that. We were under the understanding that the WBT zoning was applying to the north
Okay.
parcel.
Part of one of these parcels does
I mean,
extend
to the
past
south.
of.
To the south.
And part of one of the parcels does extend past Highway 40 to the south, it looks like. I mean, it's hard to tell, these aren't
No.
very accurate maps, but
No, none of them do.
the most southerly parcel does not?
No, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Rebecca?
So the way I understand it, though, this is the first time we've actually formally gotten a request from you, right? You've been in discussions for a long time, but you were waiting on other issues that kind of arose with water and different things.
No, ma'am. We made a formal request that we planned to request, or that we would be requesting annexation, but you guys had, I believe, the process that was precedent was we had to make a written request, as we did, and it, as you remember, it was during the COVID period where we weren't having formal meetings. We were doing them over Zoom or whatever process you guys use, or system. It kept getting tabled. There was discussions. We've all met multiple times. I think we all met over here in regards to a meeting on the specific zoning that you were requesting for south of the highway. But we couldn't do anything. We would have 18 months ago signed this agreement that we signed on the 14th to formally start that legal process. But you all had to approve the annexation of the ability to annex these properties. It's taken us 18 months to get to that point. We would have done that 18 months ago. We had a permit a year ago for stormwater management, and there's been no hiccups whatsoever. We haven't waited on anything. We're just waiting on tonight for you to formally approve the annexation that we thought was coming. I had no warning that there was this waiting.
So I guess, can I clarify a little bit? I think what Eric is talking about is the extension of services plan. We did formally move our borderline for extension of services about 18 months ago. So we never had a petition to annex until 2 weeks ago, a week and a half ago. But he's correct that he was waiting to see whether or not the city would extend its extension of services plan, which is required for someone to petition for annexation. So maybe that provides a little bit of clarity.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yes, ma'am.
Thanks, Eric. Steve, sure.
Just to clarify this in my mind, the B2 zoning change would come before the planning board first, and then it would also come before council after that.
Yeah, well, right now in this particular process, if you guys postpone this till June, and then we'll have that new process in place, and then they would bypass the zoning would bypass the planning board and come straight to council.
Well, I mean, in the way that the current system runs, if we approve this tonight, it still has to get approved WB2 at the planning board, and then council still has to pass that. And we can zone it however we seem fit at any step along the way at that point, correct?
True.
Okay.
As long as it's consistent with the growth policy, yeah.
Thank you.
Further discussion? Everyone clear on the motion? All those in favor, please raise your hand. Those opposed, like sign. And the motion, I will vote. I'm going to go ahead and vote against the motion. The motion does fail on a 4-3 vote.
Do we need another motion?
We need now a motion to approve that item, please.
I'll move to approve item number 5D on the consent agenda.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Seconded by Councilor Caltabiano. Further discussion? All those in favor, please raise your hand. You're voting to approve the annexation of said parcel. Tonight. Is that clear? All those in favor, please raise your hand. Those opposed, like sign. I'll vote in favor, and it passes on a 4-3 vote with, remind me who voted in opposition, Councilors Sweeney, Davis, and Norton voting in opposition. Painful. Thanks for coming. Thanks for your patience with our process. I know it's not easy to follow. We're doing our best up here. We'll move on to item 6A of our agenda, which is ordinance 23, if I'm not mistaken, -2, an interim zoning ordinance prohibiting the approval of new applications for administrative conditional use permits for marijuana dispensaries, and this is the only reading as it is an interim or emergency ordinance. Dave?
Yeah, so at your last meeting, you guys directed staff to bring back an interim ordinance, which we can do under state law. I provided you a memo that kind of outlined the criteria that's within state law. So yeah, do you guys just have an opportunity to discuss the pros and cons of it? That would be a 6-month prohibition, and during that process, we would have work sessions with the council, and we would, through those things, determine, if there's some zoning things that need to be amended on the process, whether you guys wanted to further restrict the distances between dispensaries, maybe perhaps move them from administrative conditional use to a full conditional use permit, or all those other things. And Angie may have more to weigh in since she drafted the ordinance.
Angie? Or not?
Sorry, I was on, or not, I was on mute, sorry. I don't have a lot more to weigh in. I think the ordinance kind of speaks for itself. The one thing that I would say is that if you guys are considering passing the ordinance, we should probably arrange a work session fairly quickly, just because interim zoning ordinances expire after 6 months. You guys do have the ability to extend that, but it's not really the purpose of the statute. So I would say if you guys are looking at it, let's move quick and kind of decide what we want to do. And I'm certainly available for questions if you guys have any.
Thanks, Angie. We did advertise for a public hearing on item 6A, and we'll hold that public hearing now. Anyone wishing to provide testimony this evening? Michelle, anyone online? I'll go ahead and close the public hearing and turn it back to the council for a motion. Frank?
Mr. Mayor, I move to approve ordinance number, I think, 23.
Mike?
Forgive me on these mics. I would move to approve ordinance 2302, interim ordinance, interim zoning ordinance prohibiting the approval of new applications for administrative conditional use permits for marijuana dispensaries.
Is there a second to the motion?
I second it. Oh, sorry.
Seconded by Councilor Fury. Frank, would you like to speak to your motion?
Yeah, I think it's pretty clear from our work session that the public and I, quite frankly, am very concerned about the proliferation and the number of marijuana dispensaries that have already been approved. I think we have certainly have enough. I think there are concerns regarding proximity to other businesses and to schools and to churches, for that matter, raises some good concerns that I think we need to evaluate a little bit better. And we didn't, quite frankly, I think there were some, as one of our former councilmen used to say, there may have been some unintended consequences associated with what we passed initially. And so I'd like to reevaluate it.
Further comments? All those in favor, please raise your hand. Those opposed, like sign, and that motion does carry unanimously. We'll move on to item 7A, consideration of approval of a raise grant submittal for a portion of the Whitefish Promenade on Spokane Avenue between East 2nd Street and Railway Street. Craig.
Yes, good evening. I'll give you kind of the cliff notes of my staff report, but if you want the full version, it begins on page 251 of your packet. So I think everyone's familiar with the Downtown Business District Master Plan, the Connect Whitefish Bike and Pedestrian Plan, and the recently adopted Whitefish Transportation Plan. All of these plans went through an exhaustive public process during adoption, including stakeholder meetings, public workshops, consultation with state agencies and such. And improvements along Spokane Avenue between East 2nd Street and Railway are identified in all three plans, making it a priority to complete the missing link of the Whitefish Promenade. With sections of the promenade completed to the north and south, this project will provide a seamless connection to Depot Park facilities and events, the downtown, the transit center, the library, the Amtrak train station, as well as connecting neighborhoods to the north to the schools. The project will also improve crosswalk and safety for students at the congested intersection of Spokane Avenue and East 2nd Street, where the middle school entrance exists. So to finance the project, the city has identified the United States Department of Transportation's RAISE grant program, which helps communities build transportation projects that have significant local or regional impacts and improve safety and equity. The concept for this section of the Whitefish Promenade from the Downtown Master Plan is included in your packet. It will include a bi-directional protected bikeway between East 2nd Street and maintain all lanes of existing traffic. The preliminary cost estimate is $1.35 million, which includes engineering, and staff is recommending a split of 80-20 raise grant funds to city funds. So based on that preliminary and very preliminary estimate, it would work out to about $1,080,000 in grant funds and $270,000 in city funds. So it is the recommendation of the Public Works Department that council authorize staff to proceed with this grant application, committing a local match of approximately 20% of the total project funds.
Thanks, Craig. Any questions for Craig on his staff report? Not seeing, I would entertain a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I'll move to approve the approval of raise grant submittal for a portion of Whitefish Promenade on Spokane between East 2nd and Railway.
Thank you. Is there a second to the motion? Seconded by Councilor Norton. Further discussion? I would just like to say you really laid out well how we've kind of assembled these different pieces to make this connection a reality, and I think it's a good example of both public and private partnerships doing their job to, you know, implement our downtown master plan. Pretty neat to see. The one question I did have, Craig, would this improvement be entirely within the city's right-of-way, or are we needing to acquire some right-of-way from the middle school?
So there's two different options for the 100 block, or actually I guess that would be the 0 block of Spokane, between Railway and First. If we maintain the angled parking, we would need an easement from the school district. One of what's actually called out as the preferred plan in the downtown master plan changes that angled parking on the east side of Spokane to parallel parking, which would maintain, allow us to build the entire project in the right-of-way. So that'll be a decision we make should we get the grant and move forward with the project, but there's options for either.
Have we discussed this with David Means at all, or the school
We've met
district?
with Dave Means and Kerry Drown on this project, as well as another one which will come to you guys next month for another grant application that we're doing. So yeah, they're aware of it.
And they seemed amenable if, in the event we did need some right away. I mean, obviously it's a win-win.
I think it would definitely be a school board issue, but you know, I think as the district director, it sounded like Dave would prefer to keep the angled parking and maintain that level of parking adjacent to the school. So, you know, it's a conversation for the future, but they're at least aware of it.
Okay, great. Thanks, Craig. Further discussion? All those in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. Those opposed, like sign, and that motion does carry unanimously. Thanks, Craig. You have Dana's report and close with the packet. Any questions for our city manager? Dana, anything additional to report on this evening?
Well, if I don't have an update for legislative items every meeting at this point, you will always get one until we hit May. Right now there are 447 Senate bills that have been introduced, 720 House bills. The last day to introduce general bills is this Friday. And the last day for transmittal of general bills to the other chambers is next Friday. So we are seeing a flurry of hearings that are happening this week and next week so that those deadlines are met. I'll just give you a couple updates. As I mentioned at the work session, the bill that would require votes on growth policies was tabled, so it is likely dead. The impact fee, Senate Bill 142, was referred to the House Local Government Committee, so it is still pending a hearing to be scheduled. That has already made it through one chamber, so it's a bill that we'll potentially see in a couple weeks. Senate Bill 245, I want to bring your attention to that one, which would revise municipal zoning to allow multifamily and mixed-use development. We did provide testimony opposing the bill at the hearing on February 8th. The committee did act, and it passed by an 8-to-1 vote with an amendment, actually, that would require any of those developments to include 30% of the units reserved for low-income to moderate-income levels housing. And so at this point, it is, with the Senate, it will have to go through the House, but at least there was some movement to identify that not all multifamily will become affordable, that the risk is that it all becomes market rate in Whitefish. That said, there are still issues with that bill in the parking requirements, maximum height, setbacks, et cetera. The Senate Bill 262 that would revise the licensing requirements has passed the Senate. That could mean significant impacts to our business licensing program, and we do generate, a couple $100,000 a year off of that revenue, or off of that program. Also allows us to have a fire marshal inspect the properties and confirm zoning, and so that could be problematic for the city if it does move through the House. There's just a lot of bad bills out there right now. House Bill 407, which would provide for affordable housing tax abatements, which has been discussed as an option, through the Strategic Housing Committee. That actually passed as amended, which all they did was add trailer courts to a possible abatement. And so that could be a tool that we do use in the future. Hopefully it will continue its way through the Senate. There is one bill I want to bring to your attention. This is a very significant zoning reform bill that really was developed through Montana Association of Planners, so all the planners had input, the League of Cities and Towns, developers, realtors have all participated in this. This bill is, probably, I can't remember how many pages, 48 pages or something long. Senate Bill 382, it's not on my report. I encourage you to read it. Probably some of the more significant changes to that bill include, there's a lot of, general information about how you adopt a land use plan, which is the growth policy that we're updating now. It also includes information about zoning and subdivision, and really provides a lot of that to be done administratively through your zoning or administrator, your staff, with the planning board being the appeal board. So pretty significant changes. It also requires some housing items to be addressed within your growth policy and zoning that would include options. So you have options of parking requirements or height requirements, or allowing ADUs on all properties. And so read through it. Definitely give me your feedback once you've had a chance to read it. This bill was created to try to allow some control by local governments and offset the bills that we're seeing that are just telling us what we can do, instead picking alternatives that would be best for our community. And so I wanted to bring that to your attention. There's still some concerns about, there's no requirement for it to be deed restricted to affordable housing, so you might just end up with more market rate housing. And then administratively approving things here might mean that they all still go to the planning board for appeals, and then eventually to the council. So definitely a bill to look at, so I encourage you to look at Senate Bill 382. And then just Just a reminder that the retreat is on Saturday at 9 a.m. at the Whitefish Lake Lodge. We will get an agenda out tomorrow for you. You've had a preliminary one already sent. And then I had a request of the, well, I should say, I met with the city managers of Kalispell and Columbia Falls and the county administrator, and we talked about potentially looking at having a fifth Monday meeting again with all of the jurisdictions. And so I just wanted to kind of get a feel if hand nod, head nod, or hand raise of, is the council interested in meeting with all the jurisdictions again on a fifth Monday?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, great. I'll bring that back. I meet with them again on Thursday, so we'll be able to discuss it once again.
Thanks, Dana.
Yep, that's
Appreciate the updates. We'll move on to item 9A. We did make appointments earlier during our special session. The council appointed Lauren Osolowski and Kimberly Wertman to the CVB representing the at-large position and transportation vacancy, respectively. So congratulations to Lauren and Kimberly. You have the tentative FY24 budget enclosed in the packet for approval. In particular, please pay attention to the tentative budget meeting dates of May 30th and June 12th. Do you see any potential conflicts for those dates, Steve? But not the 30th. Okay. Hard to forecast that far in advance, I understand, but do your best to attend these meetings. They are important. Dana, one question I did have for you is, are we going to have smaller breakout meetings? Are you going to have smaller breakout meetings with 2 counselors at a time?
That is the intent. We'll see what we can discuss at the retreat and see the comfort of the council moving forward. But I do still intend to have those meetings in March.
Okay. Further comments? I would need a motion to approve the tentative FY24 budget schedule.
I will move to approve the tentative budget schedule.
Is there a second?
And I do second.
Seconded by Giuseppe. Further discussion? All those in favor, please raise your hand. Those opposed, like sign, and that carries unanimously. We've already addressed item 9C on our agenda by approving the building plans for North Valley Music School. Thank you for that. And you do have a letter that we drafted at the request of Flathead Electric Co-op asking us to support the Holy Cross Energy in its application under the DOE's bill for Grid Resilience and Innovation Partnership, FOA, for Topic Area 1. Any comments on that letter? With your showing of hands, I'll go ahead and sign that for the city. Rebecca.
Did we already miss the deadline, or can we go ahead and submit it?
They were going to let us have till tomorrow, I think, because it's due the end of this week.
That sounds like a great idea. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Rebecca. And tonight we'll start left to right. Andy, anything for this evening?
I just have one thing I'd like to recognize and just take a minute to remember a former counselor of mine. I think, John, you served with him also. Nick Palmer, who passed away a week ago Monday. I was very fortunate to have seen him actually the Friday night before, which was really awesome. So, and it's funny how things work out that way. Nick was a very passionate person as a counselor, I would say. He was super enthusiastic, and I always appreciated the kind of little different point of view he would bring to the table for us, and it was always pretty much spot on, even though I didn't always agree with it. We can thank him probably for Craig figuring out how to put manholes not in the travel lanes on our roadways anymore. It was one of Nick's pet peeves, actually. He always did that, so hopefully we fixed that problem for him. His Barbara did reach out to me, and I think she reached out to John. There will be a memorial for him on March 19th, I believe. Unfortunately, John and I will both be gone. If anyone else from the council would like to attend that, I would think it would mean a lot to the family. And for some reason, as a good friend as Nick was, I did not realize that Phil Boland was his brother-in-law.
Yeah.
And I don't know why I had never known that. So anyway, to all of the family, we do give our deepest condolences, I think, as a council, and
Absolutely.
Appreciate all the years of service that Nick put in sitting up here. He will be missed as a friend.
He certainly will, and I will say, and he's probably going to laugh at this comment, he's the reason I'm here, so I can blame him. I was in a owner's meeting at my company one day 18 years ago now. And Nick called me, he had seen me on the Lakeshore Protection Committee, and he encouraged me to apply for a vacancy position that Andy was serving as mayor at the time, and I was fortunate to have been appointed, so I can always blame Nick for the reason that I've served up here 17 and 1/3 years. So thank you, Nick, and God bless you, and we certainly will miss you. Rebecca.
Yeah, he was also my neighbor, so I got to see him on Christmas, actually. And, he had a stroke and then was declining quite a bit. And so it's a blessing he didn't have to suffer more, but it's really sweet that he made such an impact on our community. I also wanted to bring up that the Robin Kelson notified us that the Free the Seeds is this weekend at Flathead Valley Community College, and from 9:30 to 10:30, the Climate Smart Glacier County meeting is happening. And then I wanted to bring up Ben's, the letter that is addressing impact fees. If we could change it to put potential outstanding class action lawsuit, because the class has not been accepted. Are we not discussing this?
No, I think we do need to discuss it.
Okay. And otherwise, that's all I have. Thank you.
Thanks, Rebecca. Ben? Yes, please.
So I have watched some of the public discussion about impact fees in two places. One of them is in some legislative efforts underway in Helena. The other place is some news reports that have come out seemingly on a recurring basis for a while regarding the lawsuit, the class action lawsuit or possible class action lawsuit about impact fees. It felt to me that some of what was being said was either misleading, wrong, or unfair as it relates to the city of Whitefish. And I know for me personally, it is difficult to comment on this matter because it is ongoing litigation. And I think it's hard for us or for me to talk about that, whether it's with the legislature or with the public or whatever. So it felt like maybe there was an opportunity for the council to, at least one time in the course of this impact fee thing, to say something about it. There is a proposal here of what that could be. I think it's fairly high level about the fact that the city has impact fees, why they're here, why we've taken the procedures, the processes that we have to figure the impact fees, why we hire outside consultants, and in general what the social purpose of these fees are, because I think they're very important to the citizens of Whitefish, and I don't want that to get lost in this discussion because it tends to get very technical. But at the end of the day, we struggle with ways to help equitably support the cost of growth in this town, and I think that impact fees are one of the very few mechanisms we have to do that. And I am remiss to see a lot of changes and things being done to them that negate their benefit to the public. And so, I wasn't sure if this letter is best from, me or from the city or whatever, but I think it would land best coming from the council, and I thought I would see if other folks agree with that. So.
I certainly support it. Showing of hands, if you've had an opportunity to review Ben's letter. If not, maybe take a moment to do so now. Otherwise, just a showing of hands if you would sign on to this letter. Just showing of hands first, please. Okay. Microphone, please.
Just with the change that it says, as has been reported in the news, there is a potential outstanding class action lawsuit pertaining to impact fees in Whitefish. There's only 4 people that are plaintiffs in that, and that has not been accepted by the courts. So
Is that correct, Angie? Okay. Are you
Yeah.
okay with that change?
It says potential. You added potential.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. I
Yeah.
thought you were reading it, I got potential, so.
No, I want the people in the city to know that the class, okay, the way I understand it is if attorneys that want to bring a suit against the city want to include all the people that were impacted by a clerical error that we sustained and we've corrected and we are continuing to correct, they want to pull everybody into the class. That has to be approved by the courts, and the courts have not approved that request by these attorneys as of this date.
That is correct of this
And they
date,
may
Rebecca.
not approve the class action lawsuit also. So I just wanted the public to know it's not a definite class action lawsuit, it's a potential one. And I just want it to be accurate.
Frank?
Maybe it's my sensitivity, but the concept in here that lawyers actually do waste public funds, I find offensive. I mean, I do. I'm not going to sign on to anything that perpetuates this ridiculous notion that lawyers are not worth their time, they're not worth their effort, and that they always have nefarious reasons for doing whatever they do. I think that line just needs to be removed. It's in the second last paragraph on the second page, and so
Yep. Yeah, Frank, I would be very clear that in no way is this intended to mean that. I mean, I think the intent of what's trying to be said, and I think obviously any better ways to write this are certainly welcome, is that litigation that doesn't serve a particularly beneficial purpose to the community may not be worth taxpayer funds. It's more about the litigation, not lawyers.
I think it reads just fine if you strike that sentence that starts with more red tape from doing that.
Yep.
Sure.
Looks like you have unanimous support, Ben. Thank you for authoring that. Very well
Thanks for your
crafted. Anything further?
No, nothing for me. Thanks.
I have a couple things. I'd also like to acknowledge and send our condolences to Paul Johansson's family. As many of you know, Paul was a steadfast contributor to this community in so many ways, whether it was the Winter Carnival float, fundraising for the float, Glacier Arrow, and the list goes on. And like Nick, I didn't even know Paul, and when I was flying back from Hawaii in 2011, he saw in the paper that I was running for my first term as mayor, and he called me. He had the courtesy to call me and ask if he could serve as my campaign manager / treasurer. So that speaks to the character of the man Paul was, and I just want to acknowledge his passing and his contributions to our community, and certainly send our condolences and best wishes to his entire family. He'll definitely be missed. And I have a big thanks to Rose and the gentleman she sent out from the water department when I landed in Tokyo a couple weeks ago. She called me and said, "We just detected that your irrigation meter has ticked off 4,000 gallons of water this month. We assume you're not irrigating, but have you been in your basement lately?" No, I haven't. You know, I'm obviously super concerned because it's an old home. And sure enough, she sent over a gentleman from Mark from the water department, and embarrassingly enough, I left the hose running from October, November. I'll admit it. At least it didn't freeze, but I wanted to give a good, big shout out to Mark and Rose. Yeah. I saw the city number come through when I landed. I'm like, do I want to take this? I'm sure glad I did. So thanks to the water department. Finally, I know there's no real solution to this, but I find it increasingly frustrating that we still can't see annexation petitions, zoning change requests, and development proposals come through as one package. And I know we've batted this around for years now in the form of a development agreement or what have you. But it's frustrating for me because they're certainly not individual applications. In my opinion, they're all bundled together in terms of how I look at things, at least here legislatively. So with that said, I have nothing further. Dana, anything further from council? Excuse me, I usually go last. Frank, my apologies.
No, no. I concur with your comments regarding zoning, annexations, and development. It makes that whole process so much harder and so much more fraught with controversy and difficulty for both the developer and for us. So anything we can do to collect those hearings into one, it would be certainly appreciated by me. On Nick front, I would join my voice to yours, John. Nick is exactly why I'm here. He approached me after my work on the planning board and had seen that and asked me to, in fact, do the same thing, apply for an open spot on the council when he was there. So I would not be here but for Nick, I guess. So God rest.
Thanks, Frank. Steve? I don't have anything tonight. Thank you, Steve. Giuseppe?
I'm very encouraged by the fact that the planning department has kicked off with the planning board the growth policy, Vision Whitefish 2045. And I would, if my words get listened out there, invite the public to be tuned as we work and be actively involved and not to kind of wait for the papers to report what we're doing, because the more proactively we work as a community, the better the process will be.
Thank you, Giuseppe. And on that note, we ran out of time during the work session, but I did want to give Alan a big kudos for the presentation, the analytical study that he completed independently of a consultant. It was stellar. It's probably the most robust data set that I've seen crunched and presented to the council in my time here. So please extend our appreciation, and I think I speak for all of us tomorrow when you do see Alan, and I'll certainly share my thoughts with him as well. Dana, anything further? We will see everyone at 9 a.m. sharp, prepared this Saturday at the Lodge for our annual retreat. We are adjourned.